The dark side of being a people pleaser. Carl Jung observed that the face we perfect for others can become the very thing that keeps us from ourselves. Here is where we begin. Plainly, as Jung wrote in his essay on the persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself, as well as others, think one is. That is from Ion. And Jung would stop you right there and say, "Do you see it? The danger was never that you smiled too much or agreed too often. The danger is that you began to believe the smile was the whole of you, that the agreement was your actual nature rather than a costume you learned to wear so the world would let you pass through it without friction. And something in that lands heavy, because most of us were never taught that the nice one, the easy one, the one who never causes trouble, might be a mask negotiated so early and so young that we forgot there was a face underneath it. So here is a small resolution, spoken in the first person, spoken now. I notice the yes I give when my body already said no. I notice how tired I am from managing what everyone else feels before I have asked what I feel. I am willing to look at the mask I have polished for so long that I mistook it for my face. And I make the unconscious conscious. Say it with me. I notice the yes I give when my body already said no. I notice how tired I am from managing what everyone else feels before I have asked what I feel. I am willing to look at the mask I have polished for so long that I mistook it for my face. And I make the unconscious conscious. Again, I notice the yes I give when my body already said no. I notice how tired I am from managing what everyone else feels before I have asked what I feel. I am willing to look at the mask I have polished for so long that I mistook it for my face, and I make the unconscious conscious. If you would like tomorrow's teaching to find you the way this one did, subscribe quietly now and let it come. Before we go further, type the 2 words "face it" in the comments. Just those 2 words. Let it be a small, honest marker that something in you is done, pretending the mask was ever the whole story. The first key is this: the pleasing self is not your character, it is a costume. And Jung called this costume the persona. Borrowing the old word for the mask an actor wore on the Roman stage, a mask cut with a mouth wide enough to project the voice across the amphitheater, and he meant something very precise by it. The persona is the compromise between who you privately are and what the world will tolerate. It is not fake in the sense of being a lie you tell on purpose. It is closer to a uniform you put on so early in life. At your mother's table, in your father's silence, in a classroom where the quiet, compliant child got the warmth and the difficult one got the correction, that by the time you were grown, the uniform had grown into your skin, and you no longer experienced it as something you chose. You experienced it as simply who you are. And this is the first quiet devastation of people-pleasing. Not that you please people. Plenty of kindness is real and costs nothing false. But that somewhere along the way, the pleasing stopped being a choice you made and became an identity you could not take off even alone in a room with no one watching. Imagine sitting by yourself on a Sunday evening, no one to please, no audience at all, and still rehearsing how you will phrase the email so no one is upset. Still monitoring a tone that has no one left to land on, that is not virtue any longer, that is a mask worn in an empty room, and notice how far this reaches, into the ordinary hours you would never think to question, the way you answer a simple "how are you" with "fine" before you have even checked, the way you laugh a beat too quickly at a joke that did not land for you, the way you order last at the table so no one has to wait on your preference. None of these moments feel like performance while you are living them. They feel like your nature, and that is exactly the trick of a mask worn long enough. It stops feeling like something worn at all. Imagine a man who has spent 20 years known at work as the easy one, the one who never complains about a schedule, never pushes back on a request, and one evening his daughter asks him plainly what his favorite meal is, and he realizes, with a small cold surprise, that he genuinely does not know. He has spent so long asking what everyone else wants that the question of his own preference arrives like a foreign language. That is the mask at its most complete. Not cruelty, not manipulation, only a face so well rehearsed that the one wearing it forgot there was ever a face underneath. And Jung's whole point about the persona was never that having one is shameful. Every one of us needs a face turned toward the world. The shame is only in forgetting there is a face underneath it. I wear the mask. I am not the mask. The second key is this. Every yes the pleaser gives out loud is paid for by a no that never gets spoken. And that unspoken no does not vanish. It goes somewhere. Jung gave us the language for this in his memoir, where he described his own childhood discovery of what he called his number one and his number two. Number one was the schoolboy, dutiful, ordinary, agreeable to the demands of Basil and his father's house, and number two was older, stranger, unimpressed by school rank or the approval of teachers, a personality with its own gravity that Jung sensed moving beneath the polite schoolboy like a current under ice. And he wrote of this split with real honesty, not as pathology, but as the ordinary architecture of a psyche, learning to survive a world with expectations. Most people never name their own number one and number two, but the people pleaser lives this split every single day without knowing it has a name. Number one is the one who says of course, the one who volunteers, the one who absorbs the friend's bad mood and the co-worker's short temper, and somehow ends every conversation apologizing for something that was never their fault. And number two is the one sitting far back in the skull, watching all this happen, tallying every unpaid debt, every swallowed opinion, every dinner where they ordered what everyone else wanted instead of what they wanted. And number two does not forget. That is the part almost no one accounts for. We imagine that if we simply do not express the resentment, it dissolves. But Jung's whole model of the psyche says the opposite. What is not expressed is not erased. It is stored. And something stored for years does not stay small. Picture an ordinary family dinner. Someone asks where you would like to eat, and you say, wherever is easiest. Someone asks if you mind switching seats, and you say of course not. Someone brings up a plan for the holiday that you quietly dread, and you nod along, and even offer to help organize it. No single one of these moments looks like anything. Each is small enough to laugh off, and that is precisely why they are dangerous, because number one walks out of that dinner telling everyone it was lovely, while number two walks out carrying 3 more unspoken no's than it carried walking in. And this happens again at the next dinner, and the one after that, until the sitting back self has been quietly accumulating for years what the smiling self never once admitted to feeling. Notice too that number one and number two are not enemies in Jung's telling. They are simply out of communication. The schoolboy did not know the older personality was there, and the pleaser rarely knows the tallying self is there either. Both are you. One simply speaks and one simply watches. And a life spent listening only to the one who speaks is a life half-lived. Ask yourself honestly this week. When was the last time you said what you actually wanted before someone else said what they wanted? If you cannot remember, that silence has a name, and it has been collecting interest. I let the silent one speak before the debt grows heavier. The third key is this, and it is the heaviest turn so far. The niceness does not make the shadow disappear. It makes the shadow larger. Jung's whole teaching on the shadow rests on one clean observation. Whatever the conscious personality refuses to live does not stop existing. It drops beneath the floor of awareness and keeps growing there in the dark. And he wrote of this in the plainest terms. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Notice the shape of that sentence. It does not say the shadow grows only in cruel people or angry people. It says the shadow grows precisely in proportion to how brightly the surface is polished, which means the gentlest face in the room may be standing over the deepest basement. And here is the part the pleaser almost never wants to hear. The brighter and more agreeable the persona on the surface, the denser the accumulation underneath it has to be, because psychic material does not evaporate simply because you have decided not to look at it. Think of it as a household budget. If you never once spend on yourself, If every resource goes out the door to keep everyone else comfortable, it does not mean you have no needs. It means the needs are compounding somewhere off the books. And eventually a debt like that comes due. Sometimes it comes due as sudden rage over something absurdly small. The wrong tone in a text message, a dish left in the sink, and you are startled by the size of your own reaction, because it has nothing to do with the dish. It has to do with every dish before it that you cleaned in silence while telling yourself you did not mind. Sometimes it comes due as exhaustion with no clear cause, a heaviness in the body that no amount of rest resolves, because it is not the body that is tired. It is the unlived no that is tired of being carried. And sometimes, and this is the part worth sitting with, it comes due as a strange coldness toward the very people you have spent years pleasing, an irritation you cannot explain, a private contempt that shocks you because you have always been the caring one. And here Jung's teaching on the shadow gives you the honest reading. That coldness is not proof you are secretly a bad person. It is the shadow finally presenting its bill. The resentment you were never permitted to feel toward anyone directly has been quietly redirected at everyone. And the tragedy of the pleaser is that they often mistake this bill for evidence of their own darkness, when really it is only the natural cost of a persona stretched years past its honest limit. Imagine a woman who has spent a decade as the reliable one at work, the one who takes the extra project, smooths the difficult client, covers the missed deadline without complaint. And one ordinary Tuesday, she finds herself furious at a colleague over nothing, a tone in an email, and she cannot understand why her hands are shaking. That fury was never really about the email. It was 10 years of unspoken no's finally finding a door. Or imagine a different life entirely. A man who has spent 20 years as the steady one at church, always the first to volunteer, always the one who says he does not mind staying late to stack the chairs, and one Sunday, watching someone else receive a small thanks he himself has never once been given. He feels a bitterness rise in him, so sharp it frightens him, and he goes home and cannot explain to his own wife why he snapped at her over nothing. That bitterness was not new. It had been collecting quietly behind every unthanked chair he ever stacked, and the shadow, Jung would say, does not care how good your reasons were for staying silent. It only keeps the ledger, and the ledger always eventually opens. The shadow does not punish you for being kind. It only asks, eventually, to be paid what it is owed. What I refuse to feel does not vanish. It waits. The fourth key is this, and it is the one that frightens people most, because it asks what happens when the mask is taken away, not by you, but by circumstance. Imagine someone whose whole sense of worth was built on being needed, the strong one, the reliable one, and then illness, or distance, or simply the passage of years removes the audience. The phone stops ringing with requests. The role that gave shape to every day quietly disappears. And what is left underneath is not a person at peace. It is a void, because the identification with the mask was so total that when it was finally set down, there was no face discovered beneath it, only an aching, unfamiliar quiet. This happens to the caretaker whose children grow and leave, to the fixer whose friends stop calling once the crisis has passed, to the agreeable one who retires and finds no one left to attend to, and the emptiness that follows is often mistaken for depression, when really it is closer to grief. Grief for a self that was never permitted to exist, apart from its usefulness to others. Picture a man who spent 30 years as the one his family turned to, who mediated every argument, remembered every birthday no one else remembered, and then the children scatter, the parents pass, and the calls simply stop, and he sits in a house gone quiet, and finds, to his own quiet horror, that he does not know what to do with an evening that asks nothing of him. Rest was never a skill he practiced. Only usefulness was. And this is what Jung pointed to. Identification with a role feels, from the inside, exactly like identity itself. So when the role ends, the person does not experience it as a role ending. They experience it as themselves ending. This is not weakness. It is simply what happens when a mask is worn so completely that no other face was ever given the light to develop beneath it, and the ache in that silence is not proof something has gone wrong with you. It is proof that something in you was never once asked a question, and is finally being addressed. The goal was never to keep performing the mask until it wears you smooth. The goal is to discover, gently, on ordinary days, long before circumstance forces the question, that there is someone underneath the pleasing who has never once been asked what they want. I am more than the role I have been playing for everyone else. The fifth key is the deepest one, and it unfolds in 4 pieces, so stay with me through all of them, because this is where the real work of the mask finally gets named. First, consider what Jung meant when he warned of identifying entirely with the persona. He called this an artificial personality lived without punishment, meaning a person can wear the mask so completely, for so long, that they believe it costs nothing, but nothing in the psyche is free. Whatever is not lived consciously is lived unconsciously instead. So if you spend 30 years being the agreeable one and never ask what agreeable costs you, that cost does not vanish. It moves to a room you have not entered yet, and no one warns you when it happens. It happens the way a stone smooths in a river, so slowly the stone never feels the water working on it. And the world rewards the smoothing. Every swallowed no earns a thank you. Every easy yes earns the words, "What would we do without you?" And each small reward fuses the mask a little tighter to the skin, until the very praise that should feel good starts to feel like a quiet grief you cannot explain. Second, consider what an ordinary day of this looks like. Walk through a single Tuesday with me. In the morning, a co-worker asks a favor that is not yours to give, and you say of course before you finish hearing the request. At lunch, a friend cancels a 3rd time, and you say it is completely fine, while something in your chest goes tight. In the afternoon, your partner is short with you, and instead of naming the sting, you spend the next hour being extra pleasant, as if your own goodness could repair a moment that was never yours to repair. A group chat makes a plan you do not want, and you type a small flame of enthusiasm you do not feel. Because disappointing 4 people at once feels heavier than disappointing yourself, which by now you do so quietly, you barely notice the loss. At dinner, someone asks where you would like to eat, and you say, anywhere is fine, though you have wanted the same quiet place for weeks. By night, you are exhausted with no clear cause. You tell yourself it was a long day, but it was not a long day. It was 7 or 8 small refusals of your own experience, stacked across a week, a year, a decade. The 6th key is this, and it is meant to end you somewhere warmer than the middle of this teaching. The mask itself was never the enemy. Jung was careful about this. He did not ask anyone to abandon the persona. A person with no persona at all could not survive a single ordinary day among other people. The politeness, the professional tone, the gentleness you offer a stranger, all of it has real value and real place. The trouble was never the mask. The trouble was only the forgetting, mistaking the pleasant face for the whole of who you are. And the correction is gentler than most people expect. It is simply this: the persona is what you present. The shadow is what you have refused. And the work of a whole life is learning to wear the first without losing track of the second. Imagine a man near the end of a long career, known for decades as the one who never complained, who covered every shift, who smoothed every disagreement in the office before it could grow teeth. And on his last ordinary Friday, clearing out a desk drawer of nothing much, he finds an old birthday card from years back, signed by people who barely knew his favorite color, who never once asked what he wanted from any of it. And something in him goes quiet, not bitter, only quiet, because he sees, plainly, for the first time, that he gave a face to that office for 30 years and never once asked the face underneath what it might have preferred to give. This is not a tragic ending, it is an honest one. And it is not too late for him, or for you, to ask the question now, rather than at a desk being cleared. You do not need to become difficult to become whole. You do not need to stop being kind, to stop being lost. You only need to notice, quietly, this week, one moment where you said yes and meant no. One small place where the face beneath the mask has been waiting patiently to be consulted. And let that noticing be enough for now, because Jung never asked for a dramatic unveiling, a sudden refusal of everyone and everything. He asked only for honesty taken one grain at a time. The same kindness that made you easy to love can remain exactly as it is, warm, present, generous, once it is chosen rather than performed, once it flows from a face, and not only from a mask worn out of old fear. The difference is not visible to anyone watching you, it is felt only by you, in the quiet moment before you answer, when you pause long enough to ask what you actually want, before you offer what everyone else expects. That pause is the whole of the work. Small, private, and entirely yours. I wear the mask I choose, and beneath it, I remain. Here is the whole picture. The mask was never your character. It was a costume worn so long it felt like skin. Every yes it gave cost you a no that went unpaid. The unpaid no did not disappear. It thickened into a shadow that eventually presents its bill. The collapse of the mask under circumstance revealed there was a face underneath that had never once been asked what it wanted. The deepest work was not to burn the mask down, but to see it clearly, one grain of honesty at a time. And the final mercy is that the mask can stay, worn now by choice instead of by fear. Kindness that comes from a face, rather than from hiding, is not a smaller kindness. It may be the first real one you have ever offered, both to the people around you and, at last, to yourself. I notice the mask I have worn without knowing I put it on. I am willing to meet the face beneath it without rushing to fix or perform or please. And I make the unconscious conscious, so let the question I leave you with be a quiet one. Not what must you stop doing for others, but who is it, exactly, that has been doing all that pleasing, and would that quiet someone, finally, like to be known?